What's going on, everybody? This is Chris from AppSumo with the Remote Work Academy, and I am here with Matt Ragland. And we are going to get going in just a minute. But before we do, let me know in the comments. Can you guys see and hear both me and Matt? Matt, you want to say hello?
Hey, what's up, everyone? Thanks so much for having me, Chris. I'm excited to do this. And yeah, just drop into the chat and let us know that you can see and hear all right. That would be incredible.
Awesome. All right, we got some yeps in here. Cool. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. This is a conversation and a walkthrough that I am very excited about. Today we're going to be talking about bullet journaling and staying productive amid the chaos. Let me know, is this the first webinar in the series you guys have attended, or have you been to a couple other ones? And what are you guys trying to get out of it? So I reached out to Matt because bullet journaling is something that I have been very interested in as just a casual observer, but never actually doing it. It always seemed a little too confusing for me, or something that would be difficult to stay on top of. But then I came across Matt's YouTube channel, and it was, Matt, what is your YouTube channel in case people want to find it?
Yeah, just just search for Matt Ragland on YouTube, but it's youtube.com/Matt Ragland. I have achieved vanity URL status, which is very big for me. Hey, real quick, also, everyone, as you're in the chat, make sure that you have your chat set to all panelists and attendees so that everyone can see your wonderful chat messages. So right now, I think it's just Chris and I that can see everything that people are chatting about. You're like,
I love having you on here because you do webinars, so you're awesome at helping moderate this as well. I'm learning a lot in just the past couple minutes. Let me give you guys a little background on Matt before we dive in. So Matt is the director of creative success at Podia, a platform for creators to build and sell courses, ebooks, memberships, and more. Matt has helped thousands of creators launch businesses over the past 5 years and practices what he preaches through his own creative content on YouTube. He lives in Nashville, Tennessee with his wife and 2 sons. Like I said, Matt has a dope YouTube channel. I've learned a lot from him. And I would love to dive into some of this today. But Matt, I would love to hear a bit more about your story, what got you to where you're at currently.
Yeah, it's probably like a lot of stories, super interesting. And so I got into remote work around 2015. I started working for ConvertKit. I was the first success hire at ConvertKit and employee number 5 overall, or maybe second success. I don't know. One of those really early on. I think we had 400 customers when I joined, and I joined the day of or around Pat Flynn published his like why I switched to ConvertKit post. And so by the time I left, it just took off. And by the time I left, we had over 20,000 paying customers. And now I'm at Podia, and it has been an incredible ride here, seeing a couple of people that are actually in the chat. Shout out to Thomas, who are also Podia customers. So yeah, we focus a lot on we are a course platform, digital downloads, membership site. Just I always like describe to people as like, imagine if you could take the courses that you had on Teachable, the digital downloads you had on Gumroad, and the membership that you had on Patreon, and combine those all together. That's what Podia is. And then from the YouTube perspective, I'd been blogging and podcasting for a number of years, but hadn't really like found the right fit for me in terms of messaging and just how I communicated best. And so in 2017, I started a YouTube channel, made about 60 videos that year, averaged about 1 per week. And one of the videos that I made was just like, hey, I'm just going to show you how I plan my week in a bullet journal. And most of my videos around that time were 100, 200, maybe 300 views. And that one pretty quickly got to like 600 or 700 views. I was like, okay, well, this is
curious
in context, like much better. And we were coming up on the new year 2018. I was like, well, I'll make an annual planning video about how I do this in a bullet journal. And I was hoping that I had about 650 subscribers at a time. By the end of January, I'd published 2 bullet journal videos. I had over 2,000 subscribers. So I had tripled my subscriber count. I was like, okay, well, I guess this is really what we're going to be focusing on for a little while. And after, 2 years of bullet journaling on YouTube, planning, productivity focused, crossed 40,000 subscribers a couple of months ago. And yeah, just continuing to hammer away
How
at it.
how did you originally come across bullet journaling? Was it through like Ryder and his book, or where did that come from for you?
Yeah, I heard of Ryder, another person who has been really influential to me, like from an analog thinking, planning perspective. His name is Mike Rohde, and he's an author, illustrator. He actually wrote a book called The Sketchnote Handbook, The Sketchnote Workbook. And his way of thinking in like thinking in pictures and analog productivity methods, I saw him write a post about how he was using a bullet journal, and I've been keeping like journals and lists and agendas and different structured planners for like as long as I've been working professionally or even back into college. And so it's like, oh, I'll try this one. It looks like really flexible and customizable for anything that you want to do. And so I've done some different things with it. I've kind of made it my own, which I always encourage people to do. Like even as you're listening to what I'm going to be saying, or anyone on like the academy, thinking about it in terms of like, how can I make something that how can I make something that works for them also work for me, while also not like meaning it has to be exactly what like I do or anyone else.
Yeah, it's learning the like the general principles behind it and then making it adaptable to what you're trying to do. Because I think that's one of the big things that people will struggle with, like we were talking
Right.
about before this call, is there are a lot
Yeah.
of great planners and journals out there. Like I was a big fan and still am a big fan of like the Best Self Journal. I used that for like a year and that was really helpful. But
Hmm.
for certain people, especially at certain times in your life when there's a lot of chaos, trying to follow like a system that is
Exactly.
continually the same every single day can be hard to keep up with. And then you can also kind of feel like you're a failure if you miss a day or miss a couple days. It can be
Oh
difficult to
yeah.
get on track. So that's
Still
what
do
was
that.
so appealing to me about the bullet journal is how customizable it can be. You can change it up kind of like day after day, or if you have like various projects going on, you have personal, you have professional type stuff. Who here has heard of bullet journaling or even tried it? I know some people said let's see, have never bullet journaled before. Best self user here. Bullet always seemed so fancy. I think the bullet always seemed too complicated for me, which is why I've never really done it, which is why I wanted to have Matt on to kind of go through the 101. Like, what do you need to get going and get set up so you can actually start using this to your advantage? Seeing a lot of comments coming through. Let's go through, Matt, if you wouldn't mind describing what is bullet journaling from just that high level of someone who's never heard of it.
Yeah, so one of the reasons that, I mean, I can say because people make the comments on my channel, one of the reasons that my channel has taken off a lot in regards to bullet journaling is just because of a couple of the comments that I'm seeing coming in of people saying like, well, it just seems so dang fancy to me. Like, do I have to be like this like professional illustrator or artist to be able to make my bullet journal work? And it is true that a lot of what gets shared on Instagram and Pinterest and YouTube even are very fancy, artistic, just beautiful bullet journal
I
layouts.
saw the like people have the emotional mandalas that they'll do in their
Oh yeah,
journals, and it's just like,
nuts.
yeah, it's amazing to look at, but the
Incredible.
idea of being like, I am not going to spend through. First of all, I am a terrible designer. That's also what turned me off. I'm like, I can't even make letters look good. My handwriting's terrible. So how could
Yep.
I do this?
Yeah, exactly. And so I got that a lot. I've never done anything like that. I do like some sketching and art. So like I have some of that, but that's never anything that I've done from a productivity standpoint. And so what I do and what I've always have found ironic about it, and you can actually this is Ryder's book that Chris mentioned before, the bullet journal method. And if you go through this book, which I really recommended it, hit me in a way that was like just beyond bullet journaling. I found it much more impactful than that. But what I find ironic about all the pretty bullet journals out there is that Ryder, when he created the bullet journal method, doesn't do any of that at all. It's just it's very simple. And so let me go ahead and switch cameras here on y'all.
Do you guys see this
And
fancy setup that Matt put together for y'all?
yeah, so just so you know, it's a Gorilla Pod on top of a Yeti water bottle. So if you think it's, super fancy.
Hey, Yeti, an Austin local. I got my
That's
got my
right.
Yeti right
There
here.
you go. Okay, so let me know if you can see this all
Oh,
right.
this
I
is
think
sweet. This is the coolest
we
one we're
should be
doing.
able to. So one of the ways that bullet journaling is really easy to get started with is the way that you do a normal layout. Now, I have created a little bit of a different one that I'll show y'all, but the easiest way to think about bullet journaling and the way that Ryder talks about it is just by making basically an ongoing list every day. And so you could make notes. The way that you can make notes, you write down times for different events or meetings that you have. But at the core of it, if y'all can see this all right, at the core of it are just these bullets. And you're making a series of bullets for tasks that you have. So when you, and yeah, as y'all can probably guess, when you complete a task, what do? You exit out, that you nailed it, you completed it. And then another thing that you can do, because we, commonly, I know this happens to me all the time, you may not get to all the things that you want to do in the day. And so if that's the case, then you're going to migrate it just by making this little angle bracket, right facing arrow to be like, okay, this is going to tomorrow. And then what I would do is just make another one the next day, recreate the same thing. Yep, so on. And then I would just know like, okay, this came over from yesterday. So it's just a really simple way. And let me show you this also real quick. So if you want to get started, we're just talking about like some materials now. If you want to get started, then there is actually a bullet journal specific notebook by Leuchtturm. Don't ask me to spell it. Just, if you go to bulletjournal.com, you'll find it. But one of the nice things about this one, if you're just getting started, is that it has a whole like key here, the legend of what you did. So task completed, migrated. So this one, if you're brand new, this is a good one to start with because it does give you a little bit of like structure and overview. And if you look in the back, there are coffee stains on mine, little feature that I have. But that'll help you get started a little bit. I will say, and we'll get back into the notebook in just a second, but I'll say, Chris, everybody, if you want to get started with this, I do have a complete like playlist series that I'm going through on my channel now called Bullet Journal Basics. And so I have spent a lot of time like going through all the like super fine-tuned details of this. But if you want to see it in like with a really good camera, a really good camera layout and everything in more concise words, because I've edited myself. Make sure you check that out. Just go to, youtube.com/Matt Ragland, look for the Bullet Journal Basics playlist. It's pretty high up there. But I want to look into the chat also, because I'm sure there's a lot of things. And yeah, I mean, Chris, what do you think about that so far?
No, I think that's awesome. I mean, a couple of questions that come to mind for me is like, yeah, where do you want to start? Because I know there's the key, there's the index, there's having like monthly, weekly, daily logs. And I think that's where people get really tripped up, because it seems like you watch one of those like beautiful YouTube videos or Instagram posts and they show you like all of the pages you need to set up. And it can just feel like one comment that somebody made is like, I spend more, or like I'm worried about spending more time journaling than I'm actually doing checking things off on my list. So are there, if you could go through and maybe debunk some of those myths or address the ones that might be realities to it?
Right. Yeah. One of the things, sorry, I tried to go over to my channel and grab the link for this. So let me get this link and drop it into the chat real quick for everybody. This is for the Bullet Journal Basics playlist here. There we go.
Awesome.
So I think it's at about 6 or 7 videos right now. But the thing that so there are multiple ways you can think about a layout, a spread in a bullet journal. And this goes for not just bullet journaling, but I think for any new thing, because what we're really talking about is like habit change and consistency for something new that you want to be doing. And I always tell people like, just start with a daily log basically and go through it kind of like I just showed you. Let me switch back in here. And yeah. And say like, okay, here's today. Here are the meetings that I have. If I want to, here are the meetings that I have, the tasks they use. Sorry if the focus is a little off for this.
No, coming through clear.
Okay. if you want to have like just a dash, an emphasis dash to make a note, those are the ones that, those are really the only things that I do consistently. So again, a bullet for a task, X through it for a completed task, a dash for a note, and then a time for an actual like event that I might need to be at. I would go through and just do this like daily log layout
Mm,
for a few days, if not like a week or two,
mhm,
just to make sure that, because what I really would encourage you to do is work on creating that consistent momentum of being like, okay, this is the time of the day that I'm going to go through and do some of my bullet journaling. And Corinne's asking, doesn't it just turn into a to-do list that you're writing for? And that's where you do start. This is where you can start to expand it out a little bit more. So if you just look at it, and the reason that these, actually I can switch into, this was my example, like filming bullet journal. This is the one that I'm doing right now. So this is for the last week. What I do is that I have a like weekly objectives, like OKRs, however you want to think about them, but I do like a weekly preview on like the week, Saturday or Sunday leading into the week, and I'll say like, okay, these are my main objectives or projects. These are also tasks that might have that I need to do but don't have a specific day or time. And usually these are my like side hustle tasks or YouTube channel things that I want to do. So I have a weekly like look ahead preview. I can also put like parking lot tasks that, again, that's basically what these are, things that I need to do that don't have a specific time. So I have this weekly look ahead. And then the change that I made to my kind of daily spread is that I still do, man, hope y'all are still seeing this all right. Just the focus keeps changing for me. But I'll go through and I have basically a half day for each, a half a page for each day. But I'm still doing the same thing. You can see up here that I have my daily meetings or things that have a specific time attached to them. And then for this other section is where I'll put in my tasks. So that's kind of how I go through every single day. And then I also do have the same thing, but for a month. And so this is just like the calendar that I have for the month. Very simple, very minimal, like just the day of the month and the day of the week right here. And I just use this more for like bigger events or reminders, like days my wife works because she's a nurse, birthdays, if we're having dinner with friends, just something that is like, you know, a little bit bigger, just as a reminder. Then I have a simple habit and mood tracker right here. And then this is where I take the key milestones and projects that I have for the month. And then I'm using this as my just initial like big picture. These are the big objectives and projects that I have.
hmm.
And then I'll split these out as needed every single week, like I showed you before. Okay. So I'll check in on the chat real quick also, but that's essentially how I do my monthly layout, which informs each week and then trickles down to each day. Is kind of how I section them off.
Awesome. So you set up the month at the beginning of the month. You do that calendar view that gives you
Yep.
the ability to just put those. You don't put everything in there. You just put kind of like those big ticket things you're doing, whether it's
Exactly.
an event, a birthday, like a launch or something like that. Just those big things you want to be aware of, and then
Right.
from there you can do the habit tracker. I like that. I like that key milestones and projects. Helping you narrow down like what is the core focus of this month. Like what do
Right.
I think one of the big things that people do, I forget who said this, but it's like you underestimate what you can do in the short term, and then
Yep.
or you overestimate what you can do in the short term. You underestimate what you can do in like the medium to long term. So being
Yep.
like
Absolutely.
30 days from now, where do I want to be? And I really like that.
Yeah.
One of the questions I have in terms of that, like each day, are you laying out the week? You said like a half page for each day. Are you setting that up at the beginning of the week, or like how much space do you need to have for each day, I guess, or is that dependent on the person?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I do think it's very dependent on the person. The reason that, and this is actually new for me, I have a video of like planning for 2020 in this specific journal on my channel. You can check it out where I go into more detail on this. But after doing this layout for well over a year of like doing about half a page, I've learned that that's a pretty good amount of space for me. Like
Mhm.
sometimes I rarely like need more than that, and I'll often need a little bit less. And so I actually, because we talked about at the beginning, the great thing about a bullet journal is the flexibility of it. But what I have actually done for this one, because I've used this layout for over a year now, at the beginning of the year, I went through and I basically like pre-sectioned out the first 6 months of the year. Because if I know that I'm using half a page for every single day and I need like this extra page, and I need an extra 2 pages at the beginning of every month to do the preview, then I know it takes, say like, whatever. I'm just pulling a number out, even though I wrote it down here somewhere, like 18 pages per month. Like, okay,
Mhm.
well, now I know that it's actually way more than that. Anyway, but I need X number of pages per month. So now I know, like, okay, well, for 6 months, I need, this number of pages to cover each month. So I do have this pre-planned out a little bit more. But even though that took me a good amount of time, like let's just say half a day, really actually not that much. Now I can go through at the beginning of every month and it takes me 15, 20, maybe 30 minutes to set up the month. And then at the beginning of each week, my setup is pretty much done. It's just now I can spend time focusing on those like actual objectives and the things that I need to do instead of just kind of like refilling everything again.
Yeah. Awesome. Does that make sense to everybody? Do you have any questions about that process in terms of setting up, planning the 6 months, the month, the weeks? That's super interesting. One of the
Mhm.
questions I'm seeing, Travis, do you blend personal and professional goals all in one journal, or do you have separate ones? Because I imagine this is also like a much bigger deal now with so many people
Yep.
working from home. It's a lot harder to separate that out where you're at the office and then you have your house chores and things like that. It's all
Yep.
blended in one, whether it's meal prep or kids or whatever. So what are your thoughts on that?
I do tend to, so I would say that my bullet journal is very professionally focused, even though I do have a solid number of like personal projects or ideas in there as well. Most of the things that I have to do personally are more just tasks than they are like family projects. Because even like a family project, like we're like doing some renovation in our backyard, but that even that is mostly like, okay, I need to buy these things, I need to do this work.
Mm-hmm.
But what I do, and this is a good segue into something, is that I will have there's such a thing in bullet journal, the method known as collections. And collections are
Mm-hmm.
basically like, if you have, they're kind of like project sections where you're essentially saying like, I'm going to have more notes about this than I should reasonably fit into like a day, or obviously as a larger project it's going to span multiple days, weeks, or months. So that's where you're just going to go to a spot in your bullet journal. And I admittedly have been like pretty bad at collections in the bullet journal in the past, but like for this one, I have a collection for an ongoing, and it has a couple more like pages on it back there. But for this time tracking notebook, like a physical notebook that I'm working on designing, and so I have multiple pages here that specifically cover like the ideas and sections for that. So I do tend to blend my journals together. However, I'll say that like for ongoing like kind of stream of consciousness, like daily journaling, I have this tiny little thing that I just like, yeah, things that I'm thinking about, just more like recording of thoughts than actual like to do items. And not to blow everybody's mind or think that it's becoming way too complicated, but I also have I don't have it with me right now, I don't know where I put it. um I also like will commonly carry around a little like field notes pocket notebook, and I just use that for like grocery lists or stuff like that if I don't want to carry around like this thing a whole
Yeah.
lot. So
What about I think I saw in one of your videos you have like a quotes section or something like that in one of your books where like if you get a good, because that's one of the things I've been thinking about is if you're reading a book and I want to take book notes, is like, is that something I would mix in here? Would that make sense? Does that then make it complicated where there's like daily to-dos and then on the next page there's like notes from the book that I'm reading and then meeting notes or something like that? Like, I guess what does and does
yeah.
not belong in a journal like this? Or is it just like customize it however you want. It's your journal.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely lean towards the latter of customize it however you want. It's your journal. I normally like, so for something that like quotes or books, I use that a lot as a collection,
Mm.
as you were saying at the beginning. So I'll have like a quote section. I don't have one in this journal, but in some other one back there is the one that you were thinking of. And then I do it a lot for books also. Even though I will say that something that I've started doing more for notes, not necessarily in the bullet journal, is I'll take a series of index cards, or actually Best Self has a cool product called Smart Marks that are
Mm.
like a bookmark with notes, like a little notepad attached to it. And so I'll do that so that I can keep the book notes in context with the actual book. So that's
Mm.
like, just as an aside, that's something that helps me like keep, because I'm really big on trying to keep information organized and contextual as much as I can. So for like, again, for like books, I'll try and like record them on a note card so that I can just stick it into the book, or I'll write it in the margins. But that gets a little squirrely.
Yeah, I do a lot of margin writing, and it's not the easiest to go
Yeah.
back to. Let's see some of the questions we have. How does the journaling accommodate changes in goals, refocusing, or shifts in work? I think that's kind of the big reason you would want to bullet journal, is
Right.
because of how you can adapt it to what you're doing. But if you want to expand on that.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head. You really can make it whatever you want. And so the flexibility of it can be really nice. Sometimes it can make it feel like I could see sometimes it could make it feel like, okay, it's not as set in stone as you might want it to be. But
Mm.
I do a lot of project planning in a bullet journal. Even though I will say, like, um, one of the thing that I use the bullet journal the most for is like the daily, weekly planning. Like there's the
Mm.
monthly layout that I showed you also. And so I use it, it's very much like in the weeds for me, like very detail oriented for the bullet journal. I know the topic of like project planning in a bullet journal has obviously come up a lot. But I'd say like for long term, like project planning, I'll often still use something like I use Notion a lot. I've
Mhm.
been kind of playing around with Rome Research some, thanks to our our mutual friend Nat Eliason has been one of the big people with that. But if something needs a lot of editing, like say a course that I'm building, if something needs a lot of editing, or something that I'm working on obviously with my team at Podia, then having something digital that you can edit and expand and contract and like change the things that you need to in terms of goals and content, like obviously a digital program works really well for that. But when it comes to, so often I will do the initial brainstorming in a bullet journal. And then, like I showed you with the time tracking notebooks, so this is the way that it kind of works for me, just to give you a look at it. So these time tracking notebooks, all of the initial brainstorming goes in here. But then when it actually, and same thing with like, you can see actually what I did here. Work on pre-selling journaling for busy people course. So I'll do most of my like initial brainstorming, or just defining. You can say I actually didn't fill in anything there, so a little behind the scenes. But defining what it is, and then I will take all of like the brainstorm information, drop it into Notion, and that's where the actual like project a lot of times will then
Mm.
take shape. But if I know, like say for one of my tasks, one of the things that I know I need to do that I have set up in the project in Notion is like, hey, this week you have to build your sales page. Then I go in, and then I'm like, okay, well now I'm going to go into the bullet journal and know that I need to have the, I'm going to go, I know I need to have the uh, update journal sales page right
Mm.
here. So it goes in when I actually like have the thing to do on a day, then it'll kind of come back into the bullet journal, because I don't want to be going, I try to not go into Notion like all the time unless I'm actively working on it. I like to look at the bullet journal, at the notebook, in order to like find out or discover what I need to do today, to remind myself of what I need to do, I really only look at the computer for planning my day, just referencing Google Calendar, just to make sure that I have like those appointments down. But other than that, I know the more that I'm in the computer, Zoolander style, I know the more that I'm in the computer, especially early on, the more distracted I'm liable to become. Or I'm just like, especially if I open up email, I can't help it. Like I'm just going to be compelled to respond, and so I just like I try and put it off.
Yeah. I guess Notion is basically the repository of everything. You kind of can keep everything in there, but it's this cycle where you're doing like the planning in your bullet journal, and then it all kind of gets filtered and expanded
Right.
in Notion. But then when it comes to the actual like execution and the individual tasks, you'll then migrate those to the bullet journal. So then on like the day to day, you know exactly what you need to get done.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, it's not like I'm writing out the lessons in
Yeah.
like in the journal and then like transferring those back. I have a video about this too. Maybe I can try and find it, but it's all about like making the switch back and forth on planning between digital and analog, because it can be sneaky. Let me see. Okay, I actually found it. I'm going to drop it into the chat. I
Awesome.
need to expand more on this idea because it comes up a lot. So I just drop this in.
One of the questions that we're getting from Timothy: you seem to be using a lot of different planners, notebooks, etc., to accomplish your tasks. Why not just use a printed layout, such as a day timer's journal, for example, the 1 day per month layout?
Sure. I mean, that's something that I've used in the past. I just didn't like the format of it.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I did I did a video about this, but for me, I'm used to it by now, and it has served me really well because over the past 5, 6, 7 years of trying out different things, I've found like what works best for me. And like the bullet journal itself, and just to kind of go back through these for you real quick. Aha. There we go. Because it is like that's a common piece of feedback that I get. And I would also say, like, we talked about this at the beginning. Maybe y'all weren't on yet, but Chris and I were talking about that. Yeah, we were talking about doing what works best for you. And so what works best for me is that the big like daily planning goes into like this good sized notebook where I have plenty of room to plan. But it's too big to like carry around with me, like day to day, or like if I'm going somewhere, but I still want to have a notebook around me. So I have like this just little field notes, slides right into the back pocket. And that's where like I'll do things like, I don't know, send my brother a diagram of a grill. So all kinds of things, like it could just be like, grocery list, like I've already talked about, but this is like just throwaway notes, things that I'm thinking about. And then this one I would actually like take away from, even like remove it from even the thought of like bullet journaling. Because just for me, this is just like stream of consciousness, kind of like more Dear Diary, if you want to think of it more that way. So I do use kind of 3 different journals or notebooks at any given time, but they all serve a really unique purpose for me, and they have different things that I use them for. The big thing on field notes is mostly just portability. Like it can't be beat, and so that's mostly the reason that I use these as much as I do.
Yeah. And again, this goes to that same concept in terms of like, yeah, there is no one perfect system for everybody. And that's the whole point, is like,
right, exactly.
This is what works best for you. This same system isn't going to work best for a lot of people. But the idea is like taking away the general principles of being able to figure out what's best, playing around with different things, and being adaptable to the change. And if your life is changing, you're doing remote work now, maybe you need to adjust the system that worked best for you while you were working out of an office.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think Alexandra brought up a really good point. It's something that has really resonated with me over the years is that the reason that I love paper so much for a from a planning perspective or from a like getting my thoughts out, I use the metaphor of for the Harry Potter fans of like Dumbledore when he pulling his thoughts out of for the pensive. And that's kind of what it feels like for me. And I can think faster than I can write. And so when I'm doing that, it allows me to take the time to really think through what I'm writing. And I have found that I just have better recollection of things that I'm doing. Like I just oftentimes I will write, especially handwriting, write to realize like what I'm actually thinking about and what matters
Mm.
to me because it takes me a little bit more time to do it. And I already touched on this, but just to reiterate on it, the distraction level with an analog tool with like whatever you want to use is naturally just way lower. It's, you know, you're not going to get a pop-up, you're not going to get a notification, you're not going to get distracted. As I will, you may think to yourself like, well, you know, you just open up this app, but it's so easy. Like, I don't know, maybe you're better at it than me, but um I'm so easily distracted by anything that I might see on the screen. Whereas if I just pick up the bullet journal and I go to the day because I have a bookmark, then like that's it. Then I'm just like, okay, like this is the thing in front of me. This is what I'm going to do. And especially working from home, especially when there are a lot of distractions, the ability to try and focus specifically on one literal physical object is like really helpful for me because then I can be really proactive going into the day. It's easy to be reactive going into the day. And so when I've written those things down, then I know maybe like, okay, well, I need to go directly into Notion or say like Bear Notes or wherever I'm Google Docs, wherever I need to be writing or the video that I need to be editing and just work directly on that instead of going in and be like, you know, let's just see what we got on the, let's just see what kind of comes to me today. And if that works for you, then great, that works for you too. I have not found that to be the case for myself and for most people, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and I think some of like the benefit of using like a digital tool for keeping track of anything can
right.
also be outweighed by the fact that you will just write down every single tiny little task that like maybe isn't that important. And I think when you have to write it down, writing it down can act as like a filtering mechanism of
Yep.
what you actually need to prioritize. You're not going to write down all of the tiny little things. You're going to put down the most important things in, and maybe that'll help get some of that focus so then you can start executing.
Yep. Yeah, but I would say like as you get used to it, like that will absolutely happen. Like it happens for me. But we've talked a lot about like as you're getting started with all of this, um, don't worry about like trying to filter too much because like I just yeah, it's like if you're trying to start a writing habit or an exercise habit. Again, a lot of this in at its core is like habit creation. If you worry about like writing the wrong thing or that it's not very interesting, then like your writing grinds to a halt. If you worry that you're not doing the right workout or you're not going fast enough or don't know what to do, then you won't go exercise. So for any of these things, if you're really early on, I would say keep it as simple as you can. Like just start with that daily log, write down like, here's a bullet point for my tasks. Here's the time that I have a meeting. Here is a note that I need to make related to any of those things. And then on the next day, just start over again. You can just go to like the main bullet journal YouTube channel and see a couple of other like good examples of like really simple ways to get started.
Yeah, this could be a perfect example of not letting perfection be the enemy of good or getting started, because
Yep.
you can look on Pinterest and see a million beautiful ones, or you could worry
Right.
like, oh no, I spilt over in tomorrow with all of my to-dos. And it's like,
Right.
hey, even the nicest journals are $20. It's like if you mess it up, you
Yeah.
can just use this one and get another one.
Exactly.
It's not a big deal if you screw it up. It's about kind of learning the lessons as you go. I'm curious about how this fits into like your overall productivity as you go through. Like, what is the morning routine, or how does this tie in? How are you doing your planning? Like, are there other things that you're doing around it? I know one of the questions was like, how do you sit down and actually execute these tasks as opposed to just writing them down?
Right. Yeah. And that, again, that takes practice also. And that's like a whole other thing that I talk about sometimes of like, how do you take the big goal or task that you have and break it down into smaller chunks? Like, how do you take something that is a goal for you at the beginning of the quarter and think about the milestones that you have to hit each month? What do you have to deliver on each week? And then what does the daily system look like? So that's like that's a whole other thing. But again, kind of going back to like making it easy to start, because I'm a huge believer in momentum when it comes to productivity. And so even if it feels a little like silly or unnecessary to, let's use the writing habit again, be like, okay, well, I just need to write my goal this week, the task that I have is to write a paragraph every day about the topic. If you just get started on it, even if, and you hit that goal, even though it seems a little silly, like how far are you going to get writing a paragraph a day? What you're really doing is building that momentum. And it's the same thing with bullet journaling. So when I write something down, even if it feels small, if I know it's connected to a larger task or project, then I can knock that out. I can create a little momentum, have a little win for myself, and then continue. And if I have time and I have something else on my list, then I can just move on to the next thing. There's a professor at Stanford named BJ Fogg who has this concept of tiny habits. And I think it applies to a lot of these things, including bullet journaling. And when you get a task down, even if it feels really tiny, but you know it's connected to the big thing, you can accomplish that thing. You can execute on the task. And like he had a research study where he asked his like a control group to just floss one tooth, and the group that flossed one tooth was more consistent in their flossing than people who just said like, hey, you're supposed to floss every day for 30 days, because of course everyone knows that. But the group that he just said like, hey, oh yeah, don't worry about all the teeth, just one is fine. Of course, once you floss that one, then it does really feel silly to only floss one tooth, and they ended up doing more and doing better. And it's the same thing for like anything when it comes to like bullet journaling. Just try and get a couple of tasks down for the day, work on those, and then move on to the next thing. If you want to add some more, great. If not, that's okay. You've accomplished what you wanted to do at the beginning of the day, and we just want to keep building that momentum towards the things that you want to accomplish. One other way to think about this in terms of like, just an acronym to keep in mind, or a mnemonic. Anyway, but it's called you want to think about acing your day, so ACE, and that's building an awareness of the time that you have. Like say doing some time blocking. I'll often do that with a bullet journal. And then clarity in the things that you want to do, and then being able to have a system where you're executing them. So awareness, clarity, and execution of the task. And if you can do that, then you'll have a lot of progress, whether you're working for yourself, whether you're working at home for the first time, working remotely. Just get into your bullet journal or whatever productivity system app that you have, and try and think about the time that you have available today, where those blocks are, where you can just focus, clarity on the thing that you want to be able to do, and then think about like, okay, what are maybe the subtasks or just like the system that I have to apply in order to accomplish those things.
Awesome. That's great. Let us know what the number one thing in the chat. Let us know what's the number one thing standing in your way, or if you're ready to start giving this a try, or what you're currently doing for your journaling practice. Matt, I'm wondering, what has it been just smooth sailing for you since you started bullet journaling and doing this, or like have you fallen off for periods, and how do you get back on? I know somebody said, I love the full focus planner, but I wasn't disciplined to use it and then felt guilty at all the wasted space. Like, how do you, I imagine that still happens. I mean, I think the idea of the bullet journal is it helps reduce some of that because you can kind of pick up where you left off, but how do you get back on track if you're missing days or weeks?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, let me show you a couple of situations. So yeah, I've definitely, like fallen off the analog wagon a couple of times. This is my self planner or self journal from a little while ago. And you can see that there is a stretch, no entries. So I used about 2/3 of it, and then kind of fell off the wagon with it. And I agree, even though what I do like about self journal is that even like I could potentially pick this back up, because like the way that Catherine designed this, like it doesn't have a specific day, so I could pick this back up. But really, what I'm doing, and so this is last year's bullet journal. And there are definitely stretches where I went through and there wasn't as much that I had in, or you can see, I know I can find, I normally tend to fall off in the fall. I'm watching too much football, reading too much about football. So here's October. You can see I didn't really like track or like do the things that, of course, that's the biggest football month. Like here's a week that I should have filled out, didn't do anything with it. And so there are still like certainly times for that. What's important, and again, I know we've talked a lot about habit change and consistency with this, but what I always do when I'm not just bullet journaling, but something that I've kind of fallen off the wagon on, could be like I haven't read very much lately, haven't been exercising as much. I try and come back to what is the simplest way that I can start. And what I'll do is I'll just go back into the bullet journal and be like, okay, no more layouts, no more like, spreads or templates, just like, here's today. What are the like 2 or 3 things that I know I have to do? Do I have any appointments? Okay, that's it. I'm going to try that again tomorrow. Same thing with exercise. Like, okay, maybe I can just go for a run or do like, 10 push-ups, something really, really small, really, really simple that you're like, okay, well, I did that. Same thing with reading, writing, any of those things. So getting back on the horse, getting back on the wagon, I think that's what you want to be. Getting back on the wagon for anything like this, bullet journal included, is just breaking it down into like, what is the simplest system or habit that I can restart with, and building momentum back up from there. And as you do that, like if you've been doing it for a long time, as I have, like I'm sure anybody in the chat can think of something, a specific habit or skill that they haven't done in a while, but you just know you can restart it because you have like a confidence in the past, even if it's not your current confidence, but like, okay, well, I did that for a really long time again. I can probably do it again. But starting a little smaller and then ramping back up.
That's awesome. No, I think the doing those tiny habits can be hugely effective. I mean, I was previously at another company that was all about habits and behavior change. And I know somebody mentioned James Clear's book. I know you have the Clear Habit Journal, and I believe his whole idea is like, if just don't miss 2 days. And there's a lot of little kind of mental tricks that you can play with yourself. There it is. I think that's one of them where, if it's, hey, I'm going to do 1 push-up or 10 push-ups every day. If you miss a day, just don't miss 2 days in a row. And that way it's like, it gives you a way to let yourself off the hook if you miss something, lets you be a little bit more generous with yourself, and also kind of motivates you to just get back on the horse and the wagon tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly.
What would you go ahead?
Absolutely. No, I was just agreeing with you.
So Jake, I guess the challenge he's having is when he tried bullet journaling, he would write down, spend a ton of time writing down all the tasks for a half hour each morning, and then would just find himself constantly migrating them over and over and over again, and then never getting things done, and then giving up on bullet journaling. And I think what you said, kind of like reducing things down to the point where they're manageable, maybe just doing like 1 or 2 or 3 things per day. Anything to add there?
Yeah, what I would do, Jake, or what I would recommend is, it sounds like you're probably, and I do it all the time too, probably overestimating what you can do in a day, kind of given the time that you might have available. And so what I would do, and what I've done with this is, maybe in whether it's the part of my like monthly look ahead or even my weekly look ahead, instead of trying to assign tasks at the beginning of the, like usually what'll happen is like, you're like, okay, on Monday, I have all these things that I need to do for the week. So I'm going to write them all down on Monday, and then I'm going to get some of them done. And then I'm going to have to write them all down again on Tuesday, because I'm migrating them. Instead, like have just basically like, these are the tasks that I have for the week. So have like just one like master weekly list of tasks or objectives. And then you can look at them like, at the beginning of each day, go back to that weekly master list and be like, okay, here are the 2, 3, 4 things that I can do. If you get through all of them, great. Reference yourself back to that weekly list, monthly list, whatever it might be. And then like, okay, knock a couple more out. And, if you try and get to the end of one, you don't quite finish it. Like this happens for me a lot. Like yesterday, I had a course lesson to write. I finished the one that I intended on. I was like, okay, well, I've got some more time. Let's just work on the next lesson. But then, by the time the day was done, Still important to set boundaries for yourself for work is overtime when work is complete time at home. But I didn't get all the way through it. So now that is the only task then now that I'm migrating over into tomorrow is just like, okay, complete this lesson on content calendars and yep, finish it up. So instead of migrating multiple tasks, I'm only like moving one or two over.
I love that. So you can basically use the backing up to these different degrees to give yourself a wider margin of error. So if you find out like you're putting too many tasks or you can't really estimate what you can get in a day, back up all of those tasks to a week. And now you have 7 days that you can spread these out over. And if that's still not good enough, you could back it up to like a monthly task list. And now you have 30 days that you can spread this across. And then you'll like slowly kind of get better at estimating how much you can get done in a day. And you can also, I imagine, pair that with, you start with, you have your weekly, like you said, you pull off 3 of them that you're going to do on Monday, and then you can always add more on if you want. And then you just kind of have to migrate that little portion every day that you may or may not miss, as opposed to having to do all of that on one day. I think that's great advice. What other questions?
Yeah, Jake, and that's a great question. Actually, I'm going to make a video about this. I'm going to write it down.
All right. Somebody is saying, try Pomodoro. Yeah, but start out with a very short time. Set the timer for 5 minutes and do the task. You'll end up. I love the Pomodoro technique. Do you use that at all, Matt?
Yeah, I do as well. I think it's really. I use a lot of time blocking, and that is, definitely one of the like core time blocking strategies.
Do you want to explain what Pomodoro is for people who don't know?
Yeah. So what Pomodoro is, usually the way that it's thought about is that you break your time up into say 30-minute blocks. And so you work for 25 minutes and then you give yourself a 5-minute break. That's essentially all it is without over explaining it. What I will often do, and this is just for me, it also depends on the tasks that I'm doing. Like if I'm doing something like email, a 30-minute Pomodoro set block is perfect. If I'm doing something a little bit more creative, a little more deep work than like say writing a lesson or something, then I'll often like double that and say, give myself 45 to 50 minutes and then take a break. And I might jump right back into it, but with more creative things like writing or editing a video, or even shooting a video, I've often found that it takes me like almost like exercising some time to mentally and creatively warm up. And so if I'm writing, then like it might take me 15 to 20 minutes to really feel like I'm in a groove. And then like if the block's up, then I'm like disappointed. So I'll often expand it out. And that's why I don't personally use like too many widgets or like Pomodoro timers in my browser or on the computer. Sometimes they're a little easier to customize, but that would be a must for me. So often I will like just put on do not disturb on my on the Mac and even on my watch or phone, and then just set a timer there.
That's awesome. Eamon, the CEO of AppSumo, and one of my buddies also does this, where they just got an analog. Man, what is it called? Now I'm blanking on what it's called. You flip it over, an hourglass.
Oh, like the hourglass?
Really, yeah. Best Self actually came out with a really nice one for that, where you can adjust the time for the Pomodoro. But that could be another way to do this analog. Let's see. So motivation, do you give yourself any rewards or things like that for either like completing a day or tasks or things like that? I mean, sometimes even just the physical act of crossing something off your list can give you a nice little motivation, but are there any things that you do in there?
Not really. And I don't say that as like, hey, this is the way to not celebrate yourself. It's actually, that's something that I'm working on personally, is to like celebrate accomplishment more, because I do think that's really valuable. Usually it has been just how I feel about like accomplishing or completing something, but I'm trying to build in a little bit more like celebration, like small celebrations of the thing that has been done. And crossing it out does feel good, but that's something I actually like journal, like in the diary, kind of journal diary a little bit more of like recognizing the thing that I've done. But yeah, I think it's really valuable. I don't have a great answer for it because I'm really terrible at it. And yeah, that does lead to stress, because you can be like, am I doing enough? Am I doing all the things today that I'm supposed to be doing? I actually wrote this in the journal in my bullet journal on Monday. And I was like, hey, I thought that I basically went through all of Monday feeling like I hadn't gotten a whole lot done. And then as I went through my list at the end of it, I was like, oh wow, I did a lot done. I got a lot done. Hmm. I didn't like celebrate or recognize it or just like feel good about it at all until I went back through it. And I was like, just close the bullet journal. Um, maybe have a snack. Like I do, I eat ice cream. I love ice cream, so that might be a little something.
Who doesn't? Awesome. Well, Matt, this was super helpful. If everyone can give Matt a big round of applause for hopping on and sharing
so
this with everybody. This was super fun. I learned a lot. What's the one thing you would kind of sign people off with for them that they can take from this to start today?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, again, just to drive the point home, start small with it. Try and build that creative momentum, just that consistency that will start to like just power your confidence in your ability to keep going with bullet journaling. But it may be a lot more than even bullet journaling that you can then apply that same lesson to. So if you get used to doing this with bullet journaling, you're like, actually I want to like practice this with writing or exercising or anything that you want to do. Just start really small with it. Be consistent. Be gracious with yourself as well. If you miss a day or two, just think like I can restart anytime and do this again.
Awesome, Matt. Thank you so much. You're getting a lot of love in here. People love the YouTube channel as well. They really love the presentation.
Awesome.
Thank you very much. This was great. Appreciate you coming on and sharing with everybody. And lastly, where can people find you? I know the YouTube channel. You want to shout that out again?
Yeah, definitely a YouTube channel, youtube.com/Matt Ragland. You can also find me on Twitter and Instagram at Matt Ragland. That's MattragLand.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Matt.
Yeah.
Everybody, thank you guys for hopping on. We'll see you guys soon.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Chris.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.